London, 1814. Miss Diana Grantham had practiced her disappointed smile in the looking-glass until it appeared convincingly serene. At 23, with no fortune to recommend her, Diana had mastered the art of graceful resignation, a necessary skill for a woman facing her fourth season without a proposal. Not that she wanted one. Marriage was merely a pleasant fiction ladies were sold to disguise the reality, a transaction where freedom was exchanged for security. "Do stop frowning, Diana," her mother chided, adjusting the modest pearl necklace at Diana's throat. "Lady Hartwick's harvest ball is our final opportunity this season. Your father cannot afford another." Diana's lips curved upward automatically. "I'm not frowning, Mamma. I'm contemplating the fascinating economics of the marriage market. My value diminishes with each passing season, while the gentleman's remains constant regardless of age or disposition. Such talk will not secure you a husband," her mother sighed. "Precisely my intention," Diana murmured, though not quite softly enough. "What was that?" "Nothing of consequence, Mamma." The Hartwick estate blazed with candlelight as their modest carriage joined the procession of far grander equipages. Diana stepped down, careful not to snag her ivory muslin gown, her best and most carefully mended. Unlike the diamonds glittering on the necks of the season's debutantes, Diana's only adornment was a spray of autumn leaves and berries artfully arranged in her dark hair. The Granthams were announced with minimal fanfare, their arrival causing not a single turned head. Diana expected nothing else. For seasons had taught her the precise measure of her social consequence, enough to merit invitations, insufficient to attract attention. "Oh, he's here," whispered Diana's mother, gripping her arm painfully. "The Duke of Marlwood." Diana followed her mother's gaze to the far corner of the ballroom where a tall figure stood in solitary splendor, a living embodiment of aristocratic disdain. Even from a distance, the Duke's aura of cold authority was palpable. His immaculate evening clothes seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "The most feared man in London," Diana murmured. "How appropriate that he dresses like an undertaker." "Diana," her mother hissed. "His Grace has £10,000 per annum and estates in 3 counties. And the temperament of a winter storm. They say he drove his last dance partner to tears merely with a glance." "Exaggeration. The Duke is selective, not cruel." "Selective?" Diana raised an eyebrow. "He's refused to dance at 3 balls this season. The betting books at White's have odds on whether he'll deign to stand up at all tonight." Diana's assessment wasn't merely hearsay. Marcus Grayson, the 7th Duke of Marlwood, was infamous throughout London society for his forbidding demeanor and merciless wit. Rumors of duels followed him like shadow, though none were confirmed. What was certain was his cutting ability to reduce the most poised debutante to stammering incoherence with a single arch look from those penetrating grey eyes. "Lady Hartwick approaches," her mother whispered urgently. "Smile, for heaven's sake." Their hostess, resplendent in autumnal bronze silk, swept toward them trailing the scent of expensive French perfume. "Mrs. Grantham, Miss Grantham, how delightful! I do hope you'll enjoy the musicians, they've come specially from Vienna." "Your hospitality is unmatched, Lady Hartwick," Diana's mother gushed. The older woman's gaze slid past them, already seeking more consequential guests. "Do help yourselves to refreshments. The apple cider punch is particularly fine this evening." Diana's experienced eye noted the subtle dismissal. "Thank you, my lady. The decorations are enchanting. Did you gather the harvest bounty yourself?" she asked, knowing full well Lady Hartwick had never voluntarily approached a vegetable garden in her life. A flicker of confusion crossed the woman's features before she laughed uncertainly. "Oh, you do have a peculiar sense of humor, Miss Grantham." With a flutter of jeweled fingers, she moved on. Diana caught her mother's exasperated look. What? I merely inquired about her personal involvement with the turnips adorning the punch table. This is precisely why you remain unwed, her mother muttered. Your tongue is too sharp by half. And yet not sharp enough to cut through the bindings of societal expectations, Diana replied, smiling sweetly as she accepted a glass of punch from a passing footman. The ball progressed as predictably as a minuet. Diana danced twice, once with elderly Lord Pembroke, who stepped on her toes throughout, and once with Mr. Finch, whose conversation consisted entirely of his new hunting hounds. She stood with remarkable poise during the fourth set, pretending not to notice she'd been overlooked again. It was during this strategic retreat to the periphery of the ballroom that Diana first noticed she was being watched. The sensation prickled along her spine, causing her to turn sharply. Across the room, the Duke of Marlwood was observing her with an intensity that seemed wholly disproportionate to her social standing. Diana met his gaze boldly, waiting for him to look away as propriety demanded. He did not. Instead, one dark eyebrow arched slightly, as though her direct stare constituted a challenge he found unexpectedly intriguing. Heat crept up Diana's neck. She looked down at her punch glass, irritated by her own reaction. Miss Grantham, a cultured voice interrupted her thoughts, you appear deep in contemplation. Are you solving the troubles of the nation, or merely calculating how soon you might escape this tedious affair? Diana turned to find Mr. Henry Whitmore, a pleasant-faced gentleman with literary inclinations, smiling at her. Mr. Whitmore, good evening. I was pondering neither politics nor escape, but rather the curious anthropological patterns of the mating rituals before us. He chuckled. Always the observer rather than the participant. One cannot be both, she countered, grateful for intelligent conversation. I believe His Grace of Marlwood subscribes to your philosophy. Whitmore nodded toward the Duke, who remained in his corner, declining yet another hopeful introduction. Though I suspect his observations are less charitable than yours. The Duke appears to treat society as an unpleasant obligation rather than a source of amusement, Diana remarked. I cannot decide if that speaks to wisdom or a fundamental lack of imagination. A silence fell between them. Diana realized belatedly that Whitmore was staring over her shoulder with an expression of alarm. She turned to find the Duke of Marlwood standing directly behind her, close enough that she could detect the faint scent of sandalwood and something distinctly masculine that made her breath catch. Miss Grantham, is it not? His voice was deep, with the kind of aristocratic precision that suggested each word was carefully measured before deployment. Diana curtsied, mortified yet determined not to show it. Your Grace. I wonder if you might enlighten me, he continued, his expression unreadable. Does your philosophy on the wisdom of social engagement extend to dancing, or do you merely critique from the sidelines? Whitmore mumbled an excuse and fled, leaving Diana alone with the most intimidating man in London. She lifted her chin. I dance when asked by partners whose conversation promises to surpass the tedium of the activity itself. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or amusement. A stringent requirement. No wonder you've spent half the evening observing rather than participating. While you, Your Grace, have spent the entirety of it declining to participate at all. Until now. He extended his hand. The next set is beginning. Will you do me the honor? The ballroom seemed to still. Diana was acutely aware of widening eyes and hushed whispers spreading outward like ripples in a pond. The Duke of Marlwood, who had refused countless introductions to the season's most eligible young ladies, was asking her, Miss Diana Grantham of modest means and unremarkable connections, to dance. She should refuse. The scrutiny this would invite, the speculation, the inevitable disappointment when nothing came of it, all excellent reasons to politely decline. Yet Diana found herself placing her gloved hand in his much larger one. "I should warn you, Your Grace," she said as he led her toward the forming set, "I have strong opinions on most subjects and a regrettable tendency to express them." "How fortunate," he replied, his lips curving slightly. "I detest insipid conversation almost as much as I detest dancing." "Then why dance at all?" His gaze held hers as the music began. "Perhaps I wish to test a theory about a woman who discusses anthropological mating rituals at a society ball." The dance separated them before Diana could respond. When they came together again, she asked, "And what theory is that?" "That genuine intelligence is more compelling than manufactured charm." His hand closed around hers as they turned. "Tell me, Miss Grantham, do you find these harvest celebrations as tediously symbolic as I do? All this emphasis on reaping what one sows seems rather pointed in a ballroom full of marriage-minded mammas." Diana nearly missed a step. "I hadn't considered it, but you're right. The metaphor is rather heavy-handed. Though I suppose the tongue has never been known for subtlety. Nor honesty. Everyone here is performing a role. The hopeful debutante. The stern chaperone. The eligible bachelor. And what role do you play, Your Grace? The aloof aristocrat too superior for common amusements." His eyes narrowed slightly. "You're very direct." "A failing, my mother assures me." "On the contrary. It's refreshing. Though I wonder if your honesty extends to self-reflection. What role do you play, Miss Grantham? The clever spinster who disdains marriage because she fears no one will ask." Diana stiffened. "I don't fear absence of opportunity, Your Grace. I fear absence of choice. There's a significant difference." The dance brought them close again, his hand at her waist. "Explain." "A woman must marry or face destitution and social irrelevance. A man may remain unwed without consequence. Marriage for you is optional, for me, it's supposedly essential. Yet it requires sacrificing my independence to a legal arrangement where I cease to exist as a separate entity. You call that choice?" The music ended. The Duke looked down at her with an expression she couldn't interpret, not anger or offense, but something more complex. "Would you walk with me to the terrace, Miss Grantham? The air in here has grown stifling." Diana knew she should refuse. A private conversation with the Duke would set tongues wagging for weeks. Yet she found herself nodding. Briefly, then. "My mother will be searching for me." The terrace was mercifully deserted, the autumn air crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. Diana pulled her shawl closer around her shoulders. "You're cold," the Duke observed. "I'm English," she countered. "We endure discomfort with stoic resignation. It's practically our national pastime." A sound escaped him that might have been a laugh. "You're unlike anyone I've met in society, Miss Grantham." "Is that a compliment or an accusation?" "An observation." He leaned against the stone balustrade, studying her. "You speak of marriage as imprisonment, yet countless women seek it eagerly. Countless women have been conditioned to believe a husband defines their worth. I simply question the premise. Yet you attend the marriage mart season after season." Diana sighed. "My family cannot afford to maintain me indefinitely. I'm here because alternative paths for women of gentle birth but modest means are shamefully limited. Governess. Companion. Poor relation. None particularly appealing. So you do wish to marry?" "I wish for the security marriage provides without the subjugation it demands." She shook her head. "An impossible contradiction, I'm aware." The Duke was silent for a long moment. "Not necessarily impossible. Something in his tone made Diana look up sharply. His expression had softened, the habitual severity replaced by something that resembled curiosity. "Your Grace, I should return inside before my absence is noted." "Marlwood," he said suddenly. "My name is Marcus." Diana blinked at this unexpected intimacy. "That would be most improper. As improper as this entire conversation has been." A smile touched his lips, transforming his austere features into something dangerously appealing. "I find I don't care for propriety nearly as much as I care for honesty, Miss Grantham. Nevertheless, we hardly know each other. A situation easily remedied. Ride with me tomorrow in Hyde Park. 2 o'clock. Diana's heart performed an undignified leap. "I don't own a riding habit suitable for public view, Your Grace." "Then we shall ride where the public cannot view us. My estate at Richmond has excellent trails." "Unchaperoned?" "Impossible. Bring your maid. Or your mother, though I suspect that would dampen the quality of conversation considerably." Diana laughed despite herself. "You're very presumptuous." "I'm very intrigued," he corrected. "A novel sensation I find myself reluctant to relinquish." He straightened. 2 o'clock, Miss Grantham. I'll send my carriage." Before she could form a coherent refusal, he had offered his arm to escort her back inside. The moment they re-entered the ballroom, Diana felt the weight of collective scrutiny. Her mother materialized at her side with alarming speed, eyes wide with speculative hope. "Your Grace," she simpered, "how kind of you to entertain my daughter." "On the contrary, Mrs. Grantham. Your daughter entertained me." He bowed. "Miss Grantham, until tomorrow." He strode away, leaving Diana to face her mother's barrage of urgent whispers and the openly curious stares of the surrounding guests. Lady Pembroke actually raised her quizzing glass to better inspect the woman who had somehow captured the Duke's attention. What did he mean, until tomorrow? Her mother demanded. "Diana, what have you arranged?" Diana watched the Duke's retreating figure, tall and commanding even from behind. "I believe, Mamma, that I've either made a terrible mistake or a fascinating discovery. I'm not entirely certain which." The Grantham residence on the unfashionable edge of Mayfair was modest by ton standards, but it was the only home Diana had ever known. The following morning found her pacing the small sitting room, already regretting her conditional agreement to the Duke's invitation. "You cannot possibly ride out with the Duke of Marlwood," her mother declared for the third time, though her tone suggested she wished for exactly the opposite outcome. "What will people say?" "They'll say he's eccentric and I'm opportunistic," Diana replied practically. "Though I fail to see why I should care. I didn't solicit his attention." "That's precisely what makes it so remarkable," her younger sister Flora chimed in from the window seat. "He's never shown interest in anyone. Not even Lady Caroline Hailston, and she's this season's incomparable." "He's not interested in me," Diana corrected. "He's interested in arguing with me. There's a difference. Dukes don't argue with insignificant young ladies unless they find them fascinating," Flora countered with the absolute certainty of 19. "He danced with you." "Only you." A momentary aberration. The conversation ceased abruptly as the rattle of carriage wheels sounded outside. Diana moved to the window. A magnificent carriage drawn by 4 perfectly matched black horses had stopped before their door, the Marlwood ducal crest emblazoned on its gleaming side. "He came himself," Flora gasped. "Not just his carriage." Diana's heart began to pound erratically. She had half convinced herself he would forget the impulsive invitation, or that she had misunderstood, or that he had been teasing her. The Duke of Marlwood did not call on young ladies in unfashionable neighborhoods. Except, apparently, he did. Their parlour-maid appeared, wide-eyed with excitement. "The Duke of Marlwood requests Miss Grantham's presence for a carriage ride." Mrs. Grantham looked as though she might faint from sheer social elevation. "Diana! Your pelisse, the blue one. Flora, fetch your sister's gloves and bonnet." "Mamma, I haven't decided if I'm going," Diana protested, though the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course you're going." Her mother practically pushed her toward the door. "Martha will accompany you as chaperone." 20 minutes later, Diana found herself seated opposite the Duke in his luxurious carriage, their elderly maid Martha wedged beside her, wide-eyed and clutching her reticule as though it contained the crown jewels. "I apologize for the change in plans," the Duke said as the carriage moved smoothly away from the curb. The weather seemed inclement for riding. Indeed, grey clouds threatened rain, though Diana suspected the weather was merely a convenient excuse. "I confess I'm relieved. My riding skills are serviceable rather than accomplished, while your conversational skills are exceptional." His direct gaze made her flush. "I've been reflecting on our discussion last night. Regarding the oppressive nature of matrimony? I fear I was unforgivably blunt." "I don't seek forgiveness for honesty," he replied. "I seek understanding. You spoke of marriage as a transaction where women surrender independence for security. Is that truly how you view it?" Diana glanced at Martha, who was pretending great interest in the passing scenery while clearly listening to every word. "Perhaps we might discuss less controversial topics. The weather, or the latest literary sensation." "I have no interest in weather or literature at present." He leaned forward slightly. "I wish to understand your mind, Miss Grantham. It fascinates me." Martha made a small choking sound. Diana felt heat rise to her cheeks again. "My mind is hardly exceptional, Your Grace. I merely speak what others think but dare not say. Others do not think as you do, I assure you. Most young ladies view marriage as the culmination of their ambitions rather than the termination of their independence. Most young ladies have been taught to view security as the highest aim, with love as a pleasant but unnecessary addition." Diana smoothed her gloves. "I simply acknowledge the reality behind the romantic veneer." The Duke's expression grew thoughtful. "And if both security and independence could be preserved within marriage? What then?" "A lovely theoretical construct, but the law grants husbands absolute authority over their wives' property, movement, and even their children. Love may promise equal partnership, but legislation ensures inequality. Unless," he countered, "one marries a man who has no interest in exercising such authority." Diana laughed softly. "Such men are rare indeed. Most don't recognize their privilege until it's challenged." The carriage slowed, and Diana realized they had entered Hyde Park. Despite the threatening weather, the fashionable hour was beginning, with elegant carriages parading along the main drive. She straightened, suddenly aware that being seen in the Duke's carriage would spark immediate speculation. "Your Grace, perhaps we should turn back. People will talk. People always talk. It's their primary occupation." His tone was dismissive. "Does it concern you?" "Not for myself, but—" She hesitated. "Your reputation is considerably more valuable than mine." Something hardened in his expression. "Is that what you think?" "That I'm concerned with how being seen with you might affect my standing." "It would be perfectly reasonable if you were," Diana said practically. "A duke conversing with a gentleman's daughter of modest means will invariably prompt gossip." "Let them gossip." The edge in his voice was unmistakable. "I've spent years cultivating indifference to society's opinion. I go where I please and associate with whom I choose. Is that why you're known as the most feared man in London? This cultivated indifference. The Duke's eyes narrowed. Is that what they call me? Diana realized too late her error. I shouldn't have repeated such nonsense. On the contrary, I find it illuminating. He studied her. Do you fear me, Miss Grantham? She met his gaze directly. No. Why not? Fear requires uncertainty. You're intimidating because you choose to be, not because you're intrinsically frightening. It's a calculated effect, like your perfectly tied cravat or your strategically cool manner. For the first time, Diana saw genuine surprise cross the Duke's face. Then he laughed, a rich, warm sound so at odds with his public persona that Martha actually jumped in her seat. Calculated effect, he repeated. You make me sound like a theatrical production. Aren't we all performing, to some degree? Diana countered. You play the forbidding aristocrat. I play the resigned spinster. We select the roles that best protect us. And what are you protecting yourself from, Miss Grantham? The question was too direct, too perceptive. Diana felt suddenly exposed. Disappointment, I suppose. If one expects little, one cannot be devastated when little is received. Their eyes held for a long moment. Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition, perhaps, or an understanding. The Duke leaned back slightly. I believe it's starting to rain, he said, though no drops had yet fallen. We should return you home before the weather worsens. Diana nodded, both relieved and oddly disappointed by the abrupt end to their outing. The carriage turned around, heading back toward Mayfair. They rode in silence for several minutes before the Duke spoke again. Would you permit me to call on you tomorrow, Miss Grantham? Martha made another small sound of surprise. Diana glanced at her before answering carefully. May I ask why, Your Grace? Because I find your company stimulating. Because you speak to me as a person rather than a title. Because when I'm with you, I'm not performing. His directness was startling. Is that sufficient reason? Diana's chest felt tight. It's more than sufficient. It's unprecedented. Then may I call? Yes, she said before she could reconsider. Yes, you may. Over the following fortnight, London society was treated to the unprecedented spectacle of the Duke of Marlwood paying marked attention to Miss Diana Grantham. He called at her home 3 times. He appeared beside her at Lady Whitmore's musical evening. He engaged her for 2 dances at the Pemberton Ball. Speculation ran rampant. Some suggested Diana had entrapped him through witchcraft or less supernatural but equally scandalous means. Others whispered that the Duke was merely amusing himself with an unconventional young woman before inevitably choosing a bride of suitable rank and fortune. Diana tried to ignore the gossip, but it proved increasingly difficult as the Duke's attentions continued. Each conversation drew her further into his confidence. She learned he had inherited the dukedom at 19 when his father and older brother died in a carriage accident, forcing him to abandon his studies and assume responsibilities he'd never been trained to bear. His forbidding demeanor, she discovered, was partly armor against a society that had judged him severely in those early years. They expected me to fail, he told her as they walked in her mother's small garden, trailed at a discreet distance by Martha. The estates were mismanaged, the finances in disarray. My father's friends offered help that came with invisible strings, usually attached to their daughters. So you rejected all assistance, Diana surmised. And built a reputation for coldness to keep such offers at bay. It was easier to be feared than manipulated, he agreed. After a while, the persona became habitual. Until the Hartwick ball, she said softly. What changed? The Duke stopped walking, turning to face her. "You did. Or rather, I heard you speaking honestly to Whitmore, and I recognized someone else who wore a mask in society." Diana looked up at him, struck by how his face had softened over their acquaintance. The severe lines around his mouth had relaxed. His grey eyes, once cold and assessing, now regarded her with warmth that made her heart beat faster. "I should warn you," she said, "people are talking about us." "Let them. They're saying unkind things. That I've somehow entrapped you, or that you're merely amusing yourself before selecting a more suitable bride." His expression darkened. "Who said this?" "Everyone. No one specific. It's the natural assumption when a duke pays attention to a woman of no particular consequence. You are of very particular consequence to me." He took her hand, an intimacy that made Diana's breath catch. "I don't care what society thinks, Diana. I care what you think." It was the first time he had used her given name. The sound of it in his deep voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the autumn chill. "I think," she said carefully, "that you deserve someone who will make you happy. Someone who understands the weight you carry. Someone who sees Marcus, not the Duke of Marlwood." "And I think," he replied, his voice low and intense, "that I found exactly that person." Diana's heart leapt painfully. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I never do." He released her hand reluctantly as Martha approached, having decided they had been stationary for too long. "Will you attend the Middleton ball tomorrow night?" "Yes," Diana managed, still reeling from the implications of his words. "My mother insists." "Good. I shall see you there. I believe there's something important we need to discuss." That night, Diana barely slept. The Duke's words echoed in her mind, tantalizing with possibility yet fraught with uncertainty. She had entered this season convinced that marriage was a trap, a system designed to subordinate women to men. Yet in Marcus Grayson she had found someone who listened to her opinions, valued her intellect, and treated her as an equal. Was it possible she had been wrong? Not about the institution itself, but about the possibility of finding a partner who would respect her independence. The Middleton ball was one of the most anticipated events of the season. The Grantham ladies arrived fashionably late, though in their case it was due to a torn flounce that required emergency repairs rather than strategic timing. "Remember to smile," Mrs. Grantham instructed as they entered the ballroom. "The Duke will surely seek you out, and you mustn't appear too eager." Diana was barely listening. Her eye scanned the crowded ballroom, seeking the tall figure of the Duke. When she finally located him, her heart sank. He was surrounded by a cluster of society's elite, including the formidable Countess of Havelock and her daughter, Lady Sophia, a diamond of the first water with an impressive dowry and impeccable bloodlines. "Oh," Mrs. Grantham said, following Diana's gaze. "Well, I'm sure he'll notice you soon. Though Lady Sophia does look particularly elegant this evening." Diana watched as the Duke bent his head to listen to something Lady Sophia said, a slight smile playing at his lips. The young woman was indeed beautiful, with golden hair and a figure that even the most modest gown couldn't disguise. More importantly, she was the daughter of an earl, with connections that would strengthen the Duke's position in society. "He's being polite," Flora whispered, squeezing Diana's arm. "You know he cares for you." Diana forced a smile. "Of course he's being polite. He's a duke. That doesn't mean he cares for me specifically." Despite her brave words, something cold and heavy settled in Diana's chest as she watched the Duke navigate the social circle with the ease of someone born to privilege. How foolish she had been to imagine herself as anything more than a temporary diversion, an unusual mind that briefly captured his interest. The evening progressed painfully. Diana danced with Mr. Whitmore and two other gentlemen, but the Duke did not approach her. She caught him looking in her direction once, only to turn away when their eyes met. By the time supper was announced, Diana had convinced herself that their brief connection had been nothing more than a flight of fancy on her part. "Miss Grantham," a familiar voice said as she prepared to follow her mother into the supper room. "I've been trying to speak with you all evening." Diana turned to find the Duke standing before her, his expression unreadable. "Your Grace. You seemed otherwise engaged." "A diplomatic obligation I couldn't avoid. The Countess is my godmother and insists on introducing me to eligible young ladies at every opportunity." He offered his arm. "Will you join me for supper?" Diana hesitated, then placed her hand on his sleeve. "I thought perhaps your interest had waned." "Never." His voice was low and fervent. "But there's something I must tell you, and I fear you won't like it." Her heart sank further. Here it was, the gentle withdrawal she had been half expecting. The explanation that while he enjoyed her company, duty required him to consider more suitable prospects. The supper room was crowded, but the Duke led her to a relatively secluded table in the corner. Once they were seated, he leaned forward, his expression grave. "I received a letter this morning from my solicitor. There's been a problem with one of my estates in Cornwall, a legal challenge to some of the property boundaries. I must leave for Cornwall immediately. Tomorrow, in fact." Diana blinked, surprised. This was not the conversation she had anticipated. "I see. When will you return?" "That's the difficulty. The matter could take weeks to resolve, perhaps longer. I'll miss the remainder of the season." He hesitated. "I had hoped, that is, I planned to speak to your father before leaving. About a matter of great importance to me." Diana's pulse quickened. "What matter?" The Duke reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Diana, I believe you know how I feel about you. These past weeks have been the happiest of my life. I've found in you something I never expected to find, a partner in every sense." "Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. I'm saying I want to marry you, if you'll have me." His grey eyes were intent on hers. "I know it's sudden. I know your views on marriage and independence. But I believe we could build something different, a true partnership where your mind and spirit remain as free as they are now." Diana felt lightheaded. "You want to marry me?" "Not Lady Sophia or someone of her standing." A flash of irritation crossed his face. "I have no interest in Lady Sophia or anyone else. I want you, Diana. Only you." "But society, damn society," he said with sudden vehemence. "I've spent years allowing the ton's expectations to dictate my behavior. No more. I love you. I want to spend my life with you. The rest is irrelevant." Diana stared at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or hesitation. She found none, only the steady certainty of a man who knew his own mind. "I can't ask for your answer now," he continued. "It wouldn't be fair. I must leave for Cornwall, and you deserve time to consider what marriage to me would mean. The scrutiny. The responsibilities. The life changes. You truly believe we could have a marriage of equals?" Diana asked, still hardly daring to trust what she was hearing. "I believe we could create whatever kind of marriage we wish." He squeezed her hand. "I don't want a dutiful wife who silences her opinions to please me. I want you exactly as you are, with all your sharp observations and challenging ideas." Tears pricked at Diana's eyes. "When do you leave?" "First light." My solicitor is already in Cornwall, reviewing the documents. So soon? The words caught in her throat. How long will you be gone? A month, perhaps 2. Legal matters rarely proceed swiftly. He hesitated. Will you consider my proposal while I'm away? Will you at least think about the possibility of us? Diana felt something unfold within her, a bloom of hope she had never allowed herself to nurture. Yes, she whispered. I'll think of nothing else. He smiled then, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. I'll write to you from Cornwall. Every day, if you'll permit it. I would like that very much. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Lady Middleton, announcing the beginning of the next dance set. The Duke reluctantly released Diana's hand, but his eyes held a promise that left her breathless. Until we meet again, he said softly. Remember what I've said. As if she could forget. Diana returned to her mother in a daze, her mind spinning with the Duke's unexpected proposal. Marriage. Partnership? Love. Concepts she had dismissed as incompatible now seemed tantalizingly possible. The Duke departed for Cornwall the following morning as promised. His first letter arrived 3 days later, followed by another every 3rd day without fail. In them, he shared the progress of his legal battle, described the wild Cornish landscape, and most importantly, elaborated on his vision for their life together. I want a marriage based on mutual respect and shared purpose, he wrote. Your independence matters to me because it's integral to who you are. I would no more ask you to surrender your autonomy than I would ask you to stop breathing. Diana read each letter until the paper grew soft from handling, then wrote equally thoughtful replies. She found herself reconsidering her long-held beliefs about marriage, not abandoning them, but refining them. Perhaps the institution itself wasn't inherently oppressive. Perhaps it was the individuals within it who determined whether it became a prison or a sanctuary. As weeks stretched into a month, and then 6 weeks, Diana's certainty grew. She loved Marcus Grayson, not for his title or his wealth, but for his mind, his principles, and the way he looked at her as though she were the most fascinating person he had ever encountered. Meanwhile, London society buzzed with speculation about the Duke's abrupt departure and his prior attention to Miss Grantham. Some suggested he had fled to avoid an entanglement. Others claimed he had offered for her and been refused. The gossip ranged from merely insulting to outright vicious. They're saying he realized his mistake and escaped to Cornwall to avoid embarrassment, Flora reported indignantly after a morning call from Lady Whitmore's daughters. As if any man would need to flee the country to avoid you. It's absurd. Diana merely smiled. The letters tucked safely in her writing desk told a very different story, one the gossips could never imagine. Then, without warning, the letters stopped. A week passed with no word from Cornwall. Then another. Diana tried to quell her rising anxiety with rational explanations. The mail was often unreliable. Perhaps he was traveling and unable to write. Perhaps the legal matters had intensified, requiring his full attention. By the 3rd week of silence, even Diana's optimism began to falter. Had something happened to him? Had he changed his mind about their future together? The uncertainty was excruciating. It was during this period of anxious waiting that Diana received an unexpected visitor. Lady Sophia Havelock, accompanied by her mother, appeared at the Grantham residence one dreary afternoon in late November. Miss Grantham, Lady Sophia said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, I hope we're not interrupting. Diana curtsied, mystified by this unprecedented visit. Not at all. Please, come in. Once they were settled in the modest drawing room with tea served, Lady Sophia came directly to the point. I understand you and the Duke of Marlwood formed something of an attachment before his departure for Cornwall. Diana felt a chill pass through her. The Duke and I are acquainted, yes. Acquainted, the Countess repeated with a slight smile. How delicately phrased. We had heard it was somewhat more substantial. I'm not certain what you've heard, my lady, but we've heard, Lady Sophia interrupted, that he paid you marked attention. That he may even have led you to expect an offer. Diana's spine stiffened. I don't believe my relationship with the Duke is a matter for public discussion. Ordinarily, I would agree, the Countess said smoothly. However, given recent developments, we felt it only kind to inform you personally rather than allowing you to hear the news through gossip. What news? Diana's mouth had gone dry. Lady Sophia extended her left hand, where a massive diamond ring sparkled on her finger. The Duke has done me the honor of proposing marriage. We are to be wed in the spring. The room seemed to tilt. Diana gripped the arms of her chair, struggling to maintain her composure. I see. Congratulations. We thought it best to tell you directly, the Countess continued, watching Diana's face closely. Marcus, His Grace, was concerned that you might have misinterpreted his attention. He can be impulsive at times, showing interest before fully considering the practicalities. Every word was a calculated blow. Diana felt as though she were bleeding internally, but years of social training allowed her face to remain relatively impassive. How thoughtful, she managed. When did you receive this happy news? Just yesterday, Lady Sophia said, twisting the ring. His Grace sent a special courier from Cornwall with his proposal and this family heirloom. She admired the diamond. The wedding will be at St. George's, Hanover Square, of course. His Grace expects to return to London next week to make the announcement official. You must be very happy, Diana said mechanically. Ecstatic, Lady Sophia agreed. Though I always expected we would marry eventually. Our families have been connected for generations, and the Duke knows the importance of suitable alliances. Her emphasis on suitable was subtle but unmistakable. The visit, mercifully, did not last much longer. As Diana showed her guests out, the Countess paused. My dear Miss Grantham, I hope you won't take this too much to heart. A young woman of your position should set her sights on more attainable prospects. The Duke was merely being kind, I'm sure. When they were gone, Diana returned to the drawing-room and sat very still, staring at nothing. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on her chest that made breathing difficult. All the letters, all the promises, had they meant nothing? Or had he simply changed his mind when confronted with practical reality? Flora found her there an hour later, still sitting motionless. Diana? What's happened? You're white as a sheet. The Duke is engaged to Lady Sophia, Diana said, her voice flat. They came to tell me themselves. A courtesy call, apparently. Flora gasped. That can't be true. His letters were meaningless. Diana stood abruptly. Please make my excuses at dinner. I find I have a headache. In her room, Diana finally allowed the tears to come. She wept not only for lost love but for lost faith. She had begun to believe that marriage could indeed be a partnership of equals, that love could transcend social expectations. How naive she had been. The following week passed in a haze of determined normalcy. Diana attended a small musical evening, made calls with her mother, and even managed to laugh at Flora's enthusiastic descriptions of the latest fashions. If she seemed slightly subdued, no one remarked upon it. The impending announcement of the Duke's engagement to Lady Sophia was already spreading through London, rendering Diana's brief connection with him a forgotten footnote. Then, on a cold December morning, Diana was alone in the drawing-room when Martha announced an unexpected visitor. His Grace, the Duke of Marlwood. Diana rose automatically, her heart pounding so violently she feared it might be audible. The Duke entered, looking travel-worn and somehow different, thinner, perhaps, with new lines of tension around his mouth. "Miss Grantham," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thank God you're home." Diana curtsied stiffly. "Your Grace. This is unexpected. I arrived in London an hour ago and came directly here." He took a step toward her, then stopped, frowning at her formal demeanor. "Diana? What's wrong?" "Nothing at all," she said with brittle brightness. "I understand congratulations are in order." Lady Sophia visited to share the happy news. The Duke went very still. "What news?" "Your engagement, of course. The spring wedding at St. George's. The family heirloom ring." Each word was carefully enunciated. "She was kind enough to inform me personally." "My engagement," he repeated slowly. "To Lady Sophia." "Yes, Your Grace." "As I said, congratulations." The Duke closed his eyes briefly, his expression pained. "There is no engagement. I have never proposed to Lady Sophia." Diana stared at him. "But she showed me the ring. Her mother confirmed it. Whatever ring she showed you, it didn't come from me." His voice hardened. "I have never given Lady Sophia jewelry of any kind. I have never discussed marriage with her or her mother." "Then why would they?" "Because they've known for years that my godmother wishes for the match. Because Lady Sophia has convinced herself it's inevitable. Because they somehow learned about my intentions toward you and decided to intervene." He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it further. "Did you believe them? Did you truly think I would propose to you, then turn around and offer for someone else?" Diana sank back into her chair, her knees suddenly weak. "Your letters stopped." Weeks passed with no word. Then they appeared with such conviction. "My letters stopped because I was injured," he said quietly. "There was an accident at the Cornwall property, a section of unstable cliff collapsed while I was inspecting the boundary. I fell nearly 30 feet. Oh my God!" Diana's hand flew to her mouth. "Were you badly hurt?" "Badly enough. A broken arm, 2 broken ribs, and a head injury that left me unconscious for 3 days." He moved closer, kneeling before her chair. "When I regained consciousness, my first thought was of you. I dictated a letter explaining what had happened, but apparently my solicitor thought it would distress you and decided not to send it." "You could have died," Diana whispered, her anger forgotten in the shock of his revelation. "I nearly did." He reached for her hand, his expression urgent. "Diana, listen to me. I have never wavered in my feelings for you. Not for a moment. I came to London for one purpose only, to ask you to be my wife." Diana's eyes filled with tears. "I thought, when Lady Sophia showed me that ring. A fabrication. A cruel, calculated lie." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "I'm so sorry you were subjected to that. But why would they do such a thing? Why go to such lengths?" "Because they know I intend to marry you, and they believe they know better than I do what's appropriate for a duke." His jaw tightened. "My godmother has been pushing Lady Sophia as a suitable bride since the girl came of age. The Countess likely saw an opportunity in my absence to prevent what she considers a misalliance." "A misalliance," Diana repeated. "Because I have no title or fortune. Because you have a mind of your own." He smiled slightly. The very quality that made me fall in love with you is precisely what the Countess fears most in a duchess. She wants someone biddable for me, someone who will maintain traditions rather than questioning them." Diana looked down at their joined hands. Perhaps she's right. Perhaps a duchess should be traditional. "Look at me." His voice was gentle but firm. When she raised her eyes to his, he continued, "I don't want a traditional duchess. I want a partner, someone who will challenge me, support me, and help me build something better than what came before. I want you, Diana. Only you." The last of Diana's doubts melted away. This was Marcus, her Marcus, returned to her just as he had promised. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered. "Never." He raised her hand to his lips. "Now, if you've forgiven me for the unpardonable sin of getting myself injured and causing you distress, there's something I need to ask you." From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it revealed a ring unlike any Diana had ever seen, not a traditional diamond, but an unusual arrangement of sapphires surrounding a pearl. "This belonged to my grandmother," he explained. She was rather unconventional for her time, insisted on managing her own properties and refused to be dictated to by society. His eyes held Diana's. "It seemed appropriate for you." "It's beautiful," Diana breathed. "Diana Grantham, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? Will you become my duchess, my partner, my equal in all things?" Diana looked at the man before her, not the fearsome Duke of Marlwood that society whispered about, but Marcus Grayson, who had revealed his true self to her alone. The man who valued her mind as much as her heart. The man who offered not ownership but partnership. "Yes," she said, joy bubbling up within her. "Yes, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he was pulling her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that promised everything she had never dared to hope for. When they finally separated, Diana laughed softly. "What will Lady Sophia say?" "I don't particularly care," Marcus replied, his arms still around her waist. "Though I imagine the Countess's expression will be rather priceless when our engagement is announced." "Will it be very difficult?" "Being married to someone society considers inappropriate." "Society will adjust," he said firmly. "They always do when they have no choice. Besides, once they know you as I do, they'll understand exactly why I chose you above all others." Diana rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I never thought I would marry," she confessed. "I believed it meant surrendering who I am." "And now?" She looked up at him, seeing all their future reflected in his eyes. "Now I believe it means becoming more fully myself, with someone who truly sees me. Marriage doesn't have to be a prison if it's built on mutual respect and genuine affection." "On love," he corrected, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Our marriage will be built on love, Diana. Everything else follows from that." The Duke of Marlwood and Miss Diana Grantham were married the following spring in a ceremony that set all of London talking. Society matrons watched in amazement as the most feared man in London looked at his bride with undisguised adoration. Gentlemen of the ton observed with interest as the new Duchess of Marlwood displayed both impeccable manners and unapologetic intelligence at her first official reception. And at every ball thereafter, despite the many beautiful women who graced London's ballrooms, the Duke danced first, last, and most often with his wife, the only lady who had ever truly captured his heart.